When it comes to these yearly rankings videos, I am now just 5 years away from catching up to the present day, but for now, let's take a little peek at 2018. Hi guys, so it turns out that I have seen 22 movies from this particular year, and today I'm going to be ranking my top 20 of those. So we've got two dishonourable mentions. In fact, no, I'm not going to call these films dishonourable mentions because they're not bad films. They are honourable mentions today. I have seen no duds that came out in 2018. Even the two films that don't make the main list are pretty reasonable films. It just so happens that the competition is very tight today. So the first film to miss out on the ranking is Unfriended Dark Web, the sequel to Unfriended. It's pretty much as good as the original, to be honest. It's a decent horror film, just doesn't quite make it in. And the other film is also a sequel, Creed 2. Now, it just so happens that this week, the week that I'm doing the filming for this video, Creed 3 is coming out, in the UK anyway, and I'd be happy to give that film a watch. I probably won't see it at the cinema, but I'd be happy to watch it at home. And I remember Creed 2 being alright. I didn't like the way that they used Drago in the film, but it's good, honestly. It's like I said, it's a very tight competition today, so two pretty reasonable films actually have missed out on the main rankings. But before we get into the main list, a quick reminder, as always, that the top two films today will go through to the eventual grand final of 100 films, where I will be declaring once and for all what the greatest film of all time is. But for now, let's concentrate on 2018, and we will start with the film in 20th place. This is the remake of Death Wish starring Bruce Willis, although now that I think about it, Creed 2 might actually be a better movie than this. I'm not going to change it around now. Death Wish is number 20. It's not a very well-regarded film, though. Personally, I really like the Charles Bronson Death Wish films. I've got the Blu-ray box set of Death Wishes 1 to 5, but I probably will never go out and add this one to my shelf just to complete my Death Wish collection. This is a fairly mediocre thriller. It's not terrible. It's satisfyingly violent in parts, and Bruce Willis does reasonably well with the Paul Kersey character, though I still obviously really prefer the Charles Bronson version. I've just got no real affinity to this film when all's said and done. It's all right, but not much more than that. Bruce Willis, though, has got some pretty severe health issues right now, so let's not begrudge him too much the fact that he's just about crept into this ranking controversially, although now that I think about it, I might even prefer Unfriended Dark Web to this movie. Let's just move on. Such were all the bad reviews given to this. I didn't end up watching it for a long time. In fact, it was only last year when Prey came out that I finally watched this, and when I did, I had mixed feelings. I mean, I probably enjoyed it slightly more than most people. I am a big Predator fan, after all, which is probably a strange thing for me to claim, given that I ignored the film for so long. But it just feels with this like they just threw everything at the wall and hoped that as much of it stuck as possible. It's a little bit of an aimless film. It's just jam-packed with stuff, this film. Honestly, there's never a minute's downtime. You're just constantly bombarded with this, that, and everything. It's sort of enjoyable, but it's definitely the least impressive of all the Predator films for me, and I include the AVP films in there as well. I'd probably give this film at least one more watch at some point in the future just to see how it digests a second time, but it's certainly the black sheep of the franchise for me. I would love to sit down with Shane Black and ask him what this film was meant to look like before the studio did all of the meddling that they apparently did in post-production, but it's for me, the Friday the 13th, 2009 of the Predator franchise, i.e. not good. Near the start of the channel, I did a Marvel ranking, and this film came bottom. There were only 24 Marvel films out at the time. There's 31 now. So my ranking is 7 films out of date. That's the trouble with doing a Marvel rankings video. It won't take long for that video to be out of date because they released these films so quickly. But at the time that I did my video, I felt a little bit uncomfortable in the days afterwards about the fact that I'd put Black Panther bottom, because I just had this feeling in my head that people who came along and discovered the video might look at the fact that Black Panther was bottom and think, oh, this guy's got a bit of a racist issue maybe. Totally not the case. I just didn't really care for the movie much. I like the Black Panther character played by Chadwick Boseman. I liked his introduction in Captain America Civil War, but when it came to this solo movie, I just didn't think it was that good, at least the first time I watched it. But I think I just had Marvel fatigue on the first viewing, because I tried to rewatch this film fairly recently, actually. I only got about halfway through because I didn't have time to watch the whole thing, but I found myself enjoying it more second time around, so that's good. It allows me to at least say more positive things about the movie today, and I'm going to give it a foothold in this ranking by putting it 18th, but overall I would still class it as one of, if not the weakest Marvel film. Maybe there's a couple of ones that are worse than this somewhere, but I've never liked this one as much as most people. This is a film about a giant shark, and I'm not just talking about a Jaws 3 size shark. Picture something many, many times bigger than that. I don't normally go in for aquatic horror films where the animals have been blown up to ridiculous sizes. You know, I don't watch films like Mega Octopus versus huge shark, you know, things like that. So that's one reason why my reaction to this film was a little bit on the mixed side. I think another reason is that I generally prefer more intimate horror films at sea with just a few characters, you know, things like The Shallows, where it's just one woman basically. The Reef, a handful of characters, 47 Meters Down, just a couple of sisters. I think the most effective at-sea horror films are where I can almost picture myself getting into those same situations as a tourist who has some kind of accident or ends up on you know, stranded at sea, something like that. The characters in The Meg are people who are not in any way associated with my world personally. They're all kind of like engineers or, you know, scientists like in The Abyss or something like that. From what I can remember anyway, it's been a while since I saw this film, but I kind of just went through this film kind of distanced from the characters almost, in a way that I wouldn't necessarily be in some of those other horror films that I was just mentioning. Plus, I can't remember that many exciting moments in this film, but the movie looked fantastic. I remember that, and I like the fact that Jason Statham's in it. He's absolutely awesome. I always enjoy watching him. I should probably watch more films with him in it, but in terms of The Meg, I might go back to it again when the second film comes out, because there's going to be a sequel. How many times do I say in these rankings that a film could be improved, possibly, if I give it a second viewing? This is already 2 Marvel films we've got out of the way today, and we're only at 16th, so clearly 2018, maybe not the best year for Marvel, although we've still got one more Marvel film to come today, and that one is a really good one. But this second Ant-Man film was a little bit disappointing compared to how brilliant the first one was. I loved the first movie. This one, it has a little bit of a villain problem, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable saying that, because normally I'm not one of those people who says Marvel's got a villain problem film after film after film. I think that is an unwarranted criticism for the most part, but this film might just be an exception because I don't like the Walton Goggins villain and his band of goons. It feels like Walton Goggins is just cast in this movie because he was a cool name going around at the time rather than because he was suited for the role. The other villain fares a little bit better. There's like a young woman who can turn herself into a ghost. I like that character, but she can't carry the villainy on her own in this film because she's just not that bad as a character deep down once her story kind of comes to the fore. But I still like our main protagonists, you know, Michael Douglas and his daughter and company. I still enjoy this film. It's still fun, but I kind of feel the same way about this as I do Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It's a sequel that just is nowhere near the brilliance of the first one. This is a found footage sequel about a haunted house in the New York area. Similar to Ant-Man, it's not as good as the original film, sadly. I was enjoying this for most of the runtime. I was quite creeped out by a lot of the various subplots and things, but it's a little bit spoiled by the ending, I think, where this supernatural villain basically stands up and starts explaining the plot of the last 2 movies and clearing up any last mystery that might have been befuddling us. But the mysteries of this franchise were what kept it creepy and unsettling, and once they are resolved, it's kind of like, yeah, the whole thing isn't really as scary as it was. So yeah, it's a shame about the ending, and I also think the storyline of the first film is better anyway. So in the first film, this house was being set up as an extreme haunted house, and I liked the whole concept of that and how it played out. Second time around, it's just an abandoned house that various characters start breaking into when they don't even have to, and then they get trapped in there. So If you're of a similar mind to me, then you might get to the end of this second one and think, yeah, this is maybe where I check out, because I haven't seen the third one. I just haven't had the motivation to since I watched number two. At some point maybe I will watch it, but I don't have the same motivation to go to number three that I did to watch number two after I'd seen the original. This film takes place on an Earth that has been invaded by these really strong monsters that have an incredible sense of hearing. So the surviving humans are basically living in countryside settlements and trying not to make any noise, because if you so much as bang a chair leg in this film, one of the creatures could potentially hear it from miles away. So humans are starting to communicate in sign language, they're talking in whispers, they're just living quiet lives without making much noise. There's so much tension in this film. We mostly follow this one family living on a farmstead, and there's one absolutely amazing sequence I remember where the mother of the family, played by Emily Blunt, is trying to give birth without making any noise because there's a monster like in the next room or just outside the walls or something. Just a brilliant performance and a genius idea, actually. I can't work out what is the cleverer scene, this one or the pregnancy scene from Prometheus, where Noomi Rapace is trying to get the monster out of her belly before the thing just explodes out of her. Just really, really clever ideas in both films. This film has not quite become a beloved film with me, hence why it's come so low today. I mean, I can't really criticise it that much. There's very little wrong with this. It is a bit of a slow burn, maybe too much of a slow burn at times. I think that's partly why I went into the sequel wanting the aliens to this film's Alien, and I didn't quite get it with the sequel. But if you've not seen this film, don't be dissuaded by the place in the ranking that it's got today. You might like it even more than I do, and I highly respect it. I am something of an Insidious fan, but this fourth one is probably my least favourite of the bunch as of today. I don't know if that'll change in the future, but certainly I don't remember feeling all that much when I was watching the fourth one. I just kind of plodded through it to get through it. It didn't have the same impact on me as the first three films. I think the biggest problem with this movie is that it's another prequel. So with Insidious, the first two movies had a pretty straight narrative, and then with the third film, they did a prequel, and I think if they'd have gone back to the normal timeline after that point, I think it would have been fine. But then they decided to do another prequel, mainly, I guess, because then they could carry on using this Elsie character who everybody seems to love. And she is a good character, but she's not essential to these films, you know. I could do without her past a certain point. But that's what they're going to do with the fifth film. They are going back to the plot line where the second film ended. So my gut instinct is with these that the fifth one that's coming out this year actually is going to be more towards that really high quality of the earlier films. We've got Patrick Wilson directing it. He's surely really going to put a shift in on this and do something really cool. Rose Byrne's coming back as well. So I'm not saying the fourth film's terrible, not by a long stretch. It's an all right horror film. But compared to the really high quality of the first three, I just found it a little bit less than those films. And just like that, we're back on Walton Goggins again. He is at least a little bit more suited to being in this film than Ant-Man 2, although he's also responsible for the worst thing in this film. So we get a really cliched ending to this. It's one of those where the main villain gets the heroine down on the ground. He's about to kill her. And then the world goes silent. The heroine comes out with some really cheesy line like, "Actually, I think you'll find it's you going to hell." And she'll reach out for some stone just off camera, bash the villain over the head, and that knocks him off the side of a pit, and, you know, the end. But I just hate that. I hate that whole setup of that, where the movie is trying to make you think that the villain is like 1 second from getting the crucial blow in, and then we get the cheesy line, and then the comeback from the otherwise defeated protagonist. It's just been done to death. I hate it. It's just, don't want to see it in any more films. But apart from that, this is a pretty decent reboot. I much prefer Alicia Vikander's version of Lara Croft than Angelina Jolie's. The Vikander version feels human. I just like this character after spending like 10-20 minutes with her, whereas with Jolie, I don't know, it just never quite the same somehow. We're not going to see a sequel to this one. I think that opportunity is now gone. I don't think COVID helped when it came to the aftermath of this reboot film. Plus, it didn't do amazingly well at the box office. But As I understand it, there are a lot of Tomb Raider-ish balls in the air at the moment. There's definitely another video game coming. There's definitely an animated series coming, possibly on Netflix. I don't know. I've heard talks that there's going to be a live-action TV show as well on Amazon, I think, and possibly another movie as well. So if you like Lara Croft, if you like Tomb Raider, there's plenty more to come. But for now, as somebody who has followed Tomb Raider, both games and films, for like over 20 years, I'd say, I'm still waiting for that really, really knockout Tomb Raider film. We don't have it yet. Like, Lara's always searching for these artifacts. I'm searching for a masterpiece Tomb Raider film, something that's going to be as good as like Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. The search goes on, what can I say? This reboot has got an advantage over the Tomb Raider reboot in that it went on to be part of a very successful 3-film arc, a trilogy. If Halloween 2018 had stayed a solo movie and Myers had died in that fire at the end, I would probably like it a little bit less, to be honest. The film then would just be this strange one-off curiosity where Laurie came back again in another timeline just for a one-off film, and then we go to another reboot. But now, because we've got this whole 3-film thing, it's almost one of the best timelines in the entire franchise, really. It might even be the best now in a lot of people's eyes. I've not yet done that thing where you watch all 3 films at home, because I could do. Now that Halloween Ends is out on Blu-ray, I've not got around to buying that one yet. I did enjoy Halloween Ends in the cinema, but I'm still trying to decide whether to buy the Blu-ray or spend an extra £10 to get the 4K. Ooh, the big problems in my life, you know. So I've not had that experience yet of digesting all 3 films over the course of a weekend or a week. That would be interesting, and maybe my position on Halloween 2018 would change again somehow, because right now I kind of place it 7th or 8th out of the 13 films if I was to do a ranking, which is fine. That doesn't mean I consider it to be a mediocre film. I'm a massive Halloween fan, so any film that's in the middle of a Halloween ranking, that's a film that I really, really like. So yeah, this film was really cool, and I think in the long run it will age quite well. When it comes to Ari Aster, I'm more of a Midsummer man than a Hereditary man. When I watched Midsummer at the cinema, it literally blew me away. I felt like I was on mushrooms just walking home. I was just like, wow, what the hell was this film, and why is it smacked me in the face like this? This is an amazing feeling. Hereditary, I watched that one at home, and it didn't quite knock me sideways in the same way that it seems to have done so for other people. But I do own the Blu-ray, so I should probably put it on again at some point. I get the feeling with Hereditary that there's a lot more there for me to discover if I give it a chance. But right now, my position is on it that it is a very, very strong horror movie. Not quite sure yet, though, that it deserves the amount of plaudits that it has got. And certainly, I can't see myself ever preferring it over Midsommar. This is one of those little coincidences that come along quite regularly, I find, when you do a channel like this. So I was just talking about The Commuter a week and a half ago, when I did my Liam Neeson ranking. Now, this film did very well in that list. It came 4th out of 20. You see, for me, this is one of the very best Liam Neeson thrillers that he's ever done. The whole thing pretty much takes place on a train in New York. Neeson's running up and down these carriages trying to sort stuff out, because if he doesn't, something bad is going to happen. And I forget the details, shame on me. I just remember it being a really exciting film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Vera Farmiga is the villain. Neeson, in my opinion, puts in one of his very best performances in this. He really turns up for this one. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend The Commuter. We've arrived at our final Marvel movie of the day, and it's showing up in a very traditional middle of the rankings spot for Marvel. I don't usually prefer the team-up movies to the solo movies, at least theoretically, but clearly 2018 is a very clear exception, because this film is head and shoulders above Ant-Man 2 and the original Black Panther. I shouldn't like this film as much as I do, because it has one of those endings that's clearly leading into a part 2 that's already been greenlit. And I can think of franchises in the past where that's pissed me off a little bit, that the movies have been set up that way. When I think of how I feel about Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and that ending where Jack leaps into the Kraken, or The Empire Strikes Back, a film that most people absolutely adore, but for me is kind of middle of the road Star Wars, mostly because of that ending. I just find it really sour, and I just don't like it. Avengers 3 does the same thing as those other films I just mentioned. You know, like half the cast is vaporized at the end of this. You're supposed to instantly want to put on the next one to find out what happens, and yet when I watched this film, Endgame hadn't yet come out, so I couldn't do that, you know. But for some reason, this film, with what it does, it doesn't annoy me as much as other franchises that have done the same thing, and I can't put my finger on why, in all honesty. As to whether this film improves over the previous one, Age of Ultron, I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm one of those rare people who thinks Age of Ultron was a massive improvement over the first Avengers film. But when it comes to the question of whether Infinity War takes that a step further and is even better than Age of Ultron, maybe just by a smidgen, I'd say. A lot of the films that I've been talking about today, I do own physical copies of them. I've just not had the motivation to get them all out of the cupboard and hold them up in front of the camera, but I'm going to make an exception for this one, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, because I got a cracking deal on this just the other week. So here is my 4K copy of the movie, and as you can see, it's a double pack with Jurassic World. So that's two 4Ks, brand new, two really high profile blockbuster movies of recent times as well, and I got them for the price of just £6.50 in the same box. Absolutely fantastic. If you like this franchise, get yourself on eBay. There might still be copies available. Fallen Kingdom is one of my favourites in this franchise, I'd say. It's the closest thing to a pure horror film that Jurassic World has to offer, because you've got this whole setup with a mansion and characters sneaking around in the dead of night, trying to avoid the dinos, and I think they go on the roof at one point. It's all really good. I become more and more a fan of this franchise, I think, as the years have gone on. It's definitely been helped by the fact that my son is such a massive fan of dinosaurs and this franchise. We have a really good time watching these films together. The sixth Mission Impossible film, and by a strange quirk of fate, the sixth film in today's ranking. I still think that Rogue Nation is my personal favourite of this franchise. That was the fifth film, but this one's brilliant as well. The whole Macquarie-Cruise partnership since they got together has been absolutely fantastic. The franchise was brilliant before. It's just gone to a whole other level since Macquarie came on board, and I'm sure 7 and 8, when they come out, will rise to those high standards once again. I'm sure Cruise has got a few great things up his sleeve to finish this series off. As for number 6, there's so many great things to enjoy in this. The London rooftop chase, the bathroom fight with the Japanese guy who turns out to be like one of the best martial arts fighters Ethan Hunt's ever come across. There's the Halo jump, and the ending as well on the helicopter with Henry Cavill's villain. That's the one thing that this film has got over the fifth one, I think, the brilliant finale. The finale at the end of Rogue Nation, one of the lesser things about it, but the helicopter stuff at the end of this is it's just on another level. It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, I'm super pumped for number 7 when it comes out this year. All I need to know is when it's coming out. This is a really strange film. Nicolas Cage plays this loner who lives somewhere like Oregon. I don't know. He's got a girlfriend, but she gets killed by this weird cult of hippies who are just randomly driving around America in a van. So Nicolas Cage goes after these people for revenge, but don't make the mistake of thinking that this is just your bog standard revenge thriller. It's not like that at all. If you go into this expecting Nicolas Cage to do his version of Taken, then you'll be sorely disappointed. I mean, there is that element to it, but it's mostly the style of this film that I remember. It's a weirdly directed film. It's full of interesting moments that almost make you feel like the whole film is a dream, or you've just taken some acid or something like that. It's just odd, the way that the style of this film, and the way that the screen moves around at times, and the music that's used, and it's a weird one. Honestly, it gave me Suspiria vibes watching this. I saw it at home a couple of years ago maybe, and it's been on my bucket list to buy for my collection for quite some time actually. I just haven't got around to it, but as soon as I saw that this film was on the 2018 list that I checked out on Google to prepare for this video, I thought to myself, oh yeah, that one is definitely going to come really high today. This is the Star Wars film that probably did the least amount of business out of any in the entire series. It really didn't make that much money at all. I just don't think the casual cinema goer was that interested in seeing a Han Solo origin story, and I probably would have put myself in that same camp at the time that it came out. But I watched the film at home at some point. I was planning to do a Star Wars ranking at the time, so I needed to watch all of them. And to my surprise, I really got into this one. I enjoyed this probably more than a lot of the mainline Star Wars films. The first city that Hans is in this, it really made me think of that city, Midgar from Final Fantasy VII. Anytime that I compare anything to Final Fantasy VII, that is a good sign, because I absolutely loved that franchise, that video game and everything to do with it. And if you're the sort of person who just rigidly decided that you didn't need anybody else playing Han Solo but Harrison Ford, then you're missing out, because the guy who plays Hans in this, the younger version of him, he does an incredible job. He's so charismatic. I love his relationships with the other characters. There's loads of funny moments in this, and there's some great action as well. This isn't a film that was just trotted out to make a quick buck. There's loads of really creative action sequences and battles. So yeah, this is a really fantastic movie, actually. The two spin-offs that they've done in Star Wars, this one and Rogue One, both absolutely superb in my opinion. This placement might raise a few eyebrows, so just to give you a quick backstory on this one. In The Conjuring 2, there was this side villain introduced called Valak, who was a nun, but a really terrifyingly scary supernatural nun. It's what a lot of people remember the most about The Conjuring 2, even though Valak wasn't in the movie that much. So then Valak got her own side movie, spin-off movie called The Nun, and everybody was super excited about it, and everybody flocked to the cinema to see it. And even though it only had a budget of maybe 10-15 million, it made an absolute fortune. It probably made more than Solo, which is ridiculous. I'm not sure if that's true or not actually, but The Nun really killed it in terms of business. But the reviews weren't great from most people who went to see it, or from critics. Most people thought it was a letdown and it wasn't scary, and Valak wasn't the same in this movie as she'd been in The Conjuring 2. But that was most people. Me personally, I really liked it. Maybe not on first viewing. First viewing, I thought it was quite average, but I've seen it like 3 times now, and it improves every single time for me. It is a little bit like an old school sort of Hammer film in my opinion, but that won't be for most people who watch movies these days, I guess. But because most of the things I like about this, things like the production design and the setting and the slow burn atmosphere of watching characters travel to this castle, nunnery place, whatever it is, in the middle of Romania or whatever. I just like the slow build feel to this film. It reminds me a little bit of when I watched the Woman in Black, that comeback Hammer movie from a few years ago. So even though it's not for everyone, I really liked it. The only thing I didn't like was probably the ending. The ending is a little bit Hollywoodized for me in this. They throw a lot at the screen in the last few minutes just to make it really dramatic and stuff, but I just don't think that was necessary. I'm definitely up for seeing The Nun 2 though, which is another sequel which is due out this year. It's scary to think that The Nun actually almost made my top 100 films of all time, which really would have just... A lot of people would have found that a bit silly, I guess, but it has just missed out ultimately today. So it's now time to find out which 2 films will be going through to the grand final, and we will start with this one at number 2. There's a little bit of a theme today, especially towards the top end of this list, of films that are just a little bit weird, just a little bit out there. They're very strange, and they're not really like films that you've ever seen before. First we had Mandy at number 5, and now we've got this one, which is definitely a strange film in all kinds of ways. And even the film that I've got at number 1 is a bit of an oddball, but we'll come to that shortly. But Annihilation was a big surprise when I watched it. I think it was just a casual watch on Netflix one night for me, and suddenly it became one of the films that I would start thinking about quite a lot, actually, over time. And this is another one that's on my bucket list to buy. I haven't done it yet, but it's not a film that's completely owned by Netflix. There is a Blu-ray release out there if you want to check that out. So in this film, there's like a weird kind of area that's opened up in America that's alien. No one can get into it. It's quite big in terms of area, and to get into it, you've got to pass through this like ethereal kind of barrier on the outside, but everybody who goes in never comes out. So Natalie Portman, who is a scientist, she goes in there with some soldiers, and I can't even begin to describe the weird stuff that starts happening when they go into this area, and it's just really strange. But I will let you discover what happens when these characters go into this area. But it's a cracking film, really, really good. And I am putting it through to my grand final, albeit not all of the number 2 films are going to make it in, I think. It just depends on the numbers. But for now, let's find out which film I have at number 1 for 2018. So if I recall, I did say that Mandy in 5th place did give me Suspiria vibes, kind of. Well, here we have the remake of Suspiria coming number 1 for me for 2018. And as I recall, I put the original Suspiria top of my 1977 list, did I? Or I think it might have come second to The Spy Who Loved Me, maybe, if I've got the year right. But I think we have both Suspirias through to the grand final, although obviously I'm going to go back and double check before I do the final. This remake is superb. It doesn't just copy the first one. It does give you the same general story, you know, American girl going to a dance school in Germany and it's populated by witches and stuff. But it just does it in such a different way. This is a much longer horror film. It goes into much more detail with the characters, and I still prefer the first one, I've got to say. And the first one was more of an instant hit with me. I loved the first one from first viewing. This reboot, it's taken me a little bit of time to really fully appreciate what they were going for this time around, but it's an amazing film to look at. It's just paced so well. The people who made this, honestly, they're so creative. It's like they were just massive fans of the original film and just wanted to do something like that again, but not the same at the same time. It's just a phenomenal piece of work. I don't think I gave it 5 out of 5 when I reviewed it. I think at the time that I watched it and reviewed it, I did find some things that did concern me. I think the most obvious thing that I pointed out as a criticism is the fact that they've got one woman playing like 3 or 4 different parts, and I've never fully understood why they did that, but whatever. It's still a terrific film. I've got it number 1 today, and I'm sending it through to the grand final with Annihilation. Before I go, I will quickly read to you the names of some films from 2018 that I've not seen, but I would like to. Red Sparrow, Upgrade, Sicario 2, The First Purge, First Man, The Mule, Aquaman. Some potentially cracking films there. But anyway, that is the end of my ranking for 2018. I will see you next time, hopefully, for 2019. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.